Hello, Nick Cheadle, my friend. How are you today, buddy? Welcome to Fitted Health and Fitness Summit. It's a privilege to have you on board today, mate, and I'm looking forward to gathering a lot of great insights for our viewers out there. So,
Thank you very
first of all, welcome.
much. Thank you. Appreciate it. Look forward to having a bit of a chat.
Mate, I just wanted to quickly share a story of how I met you through Instagram. It actually came through my girlfriend, Emily. She was following you on Instagram a while ago, and I don't follow a lot of outside people. It's mainly for my friends and family and stuff like that. So, and
Yeah.
Emily comes up to me one day and goes, "I'm following this guy called Nick Cheadle on Instagram," and I'm sitting there going, hold it, you're following other dudes, on Instagram. What's going on here? And she goes, you have to check this guy out. He's just got something different about him. So I went and checked you out and instantly fell in love with it, with the way you do things, your approach to fitness. Mate, you look great. You have a practical approach to things with your nutrition, with your exercises. And as I said, there's a lot of humility in what you're doing. You're posting photos, you're eating pizza and stuff like all these sorts of things. So, and I really like that, and I really embrace that. I think the fitness industry needs more of that because it's a very serious industry to be in, and then you just bring this light-hearted feel to it. My first question to you, Nick, because we're based on physique and people have this misconceptions of junk food and stuff like that. I just wanted to go and find out a little bit more of a background. Where did this all start?
Well, mate, that's one hell of an intro. Thank you very much for the kind words. I think it's pretty cool that obviously social media gives us the opportunity to obviously spread and um, further develop our exposure through those portals. So it's pretty cool that obviously your girlfriend found me and was able to pass my stuff on to you. Yeah, look, mate, it's been a bit of a whirlwind ride, to be honest. Initially when I first started out as a PT, I did so because I wanted to look at simply earning some reasonable dosh per hour, some reasonable money per hour while I was studying at uni. And it wasn't sort of too much longer after beginning that I decided to really start to focus more on the PT side of things, and studying took a back step, sort of a back seat. And then I think, you mentioned we're talking about physique first and foremost today. I think for me, prioritizing the way I looked became a bit of an obsession originally, and I tended to put that above all else. And then I guess over the last couple of years, what's ended up happening has been more of a learning experience, not in terms of how can I make my physique as good as possible, but how can I look more or less the way I want to look while still being able to live the life and incorporate the things that I love doing into my lifestyle, in a manner that is sustainable as well. So for me now, it's more about I still love to look the way that I look, but for me now, it's more about how can I still do that whilst enjoying myself, enjoying my food, and not having to give up on things in life that most people think that you do have to give up on simply to get there. So for me, it's all about that sustainability thing now, whereas originally I think it was more of an obsession. I used to spend my days, reading about my favorite athletes and the ridiculous meal plans that they supposedly stuck to and how hardcore everything had to be and was supposed to be. And, if you're able to be more hardcore than the next person, then you're probably going to get better results than the next person. But really all that's done has ended up, providing me with an education as to just how unsustainable that approach is and how important it is to find something that you can stick to for a long period of time. Because if you are intending to look good and to enjoy the whole process of building and improving upon your physique, it's going to take some time. And if that time is not being spent in an enjoyable fashion, then chances are you probably aren't going to be able to stick to it for as long as you might otherwise be able to.
Yeah, exactly right. And you are talking about food. You mentioned food then, and in some of your clips on YouTube, because I'm following that as well. You talk about flexible dieting. What does that mean? Can you expand on that just a little bit more?
Yeah, of course, man. So when I first started, I guess, training and eating with the intention of improving my physique and improving the way that I look, I guess I stuck to what is now considered to be fairly old school bodybuilding methods, eating what most people consider to be clean foods, minimal junk food, no soft drink, trying to, avoid sugar, no alcohol, all that sort of stuff. When the reality is that there really are no good foods and bad foods. There are more just foods that contain more macro and micronutrients than others. There are some nutrient dense foods and there are some foods that aren't quite so nutrient dense. And in the same line of thinking, there are foods that contain a lot of calories and a lot of protein, a lot of carbs, a lot of fats, and others that maybe don't.
Yeah.
And if we start to eat with nutritional goals in mind rather than considering certain foods as good or bads and eating to meet targets and stick within nutritional guidelines, then ultimately your approach to eating becomes far more flexible. So rather than looking at, as I say, rather than looking at foods as good or bad, it's more about, I need this much protein, this many carbs, and this much fat each day. How can I go about getting that in a healthy yet sustainable fashion? So it's all about choices, it's all about sacrifices, I guess, in terms of, can I eat this, can I eat that? But with a little planning, it tends to work out pretty well in regards to looking after the hunger aspect versus the curing a craving aspect. So for me, each day I aim to eat, X amount of protein, carbs, and fats, and simply choose the food sources that I feel will A, fill me up the best, B, provide me with the most optimal level of performance for my training, and C, allow me to hit my target numbers or my target macronutrients each day in a fashion that is sustainable. So essentially I aim to enjoy my food as much as possible while still eating some good healthy stuff.
Yeah, exactly right. Mate, so is there certain rules that you tend to follow then? Like, I know you're talking about macro and micro. Like, say I came to you and, more people, will be coming to you after this summit, I'm sure, because you got a value of information. Do you find that there's a certain rules to follow? Like, if I was to come to you and go, mate, this is what I would stick to, like this amount, this amount, this amount, or is it like a set formula or something like that, or it's just it's an expansive, ever-growing thing to continuously learn?
I think there are varying degrees of, I guess there's like a hierarchy of guidelines and things you'd want to consider, with a few things being very important and other things contributing to the way that you might perform and move throughout the day that aren't quite so significant in terms of body composition. They all might contribute to looking better, but at the end of the day, if you're hitting your target macronutrients, and they've been calculated, accordingly based on your goals, activity levels, and current composition.
Yeah.
If you're hitting those daily macros, you are going to be progressing. You're going to be moving forward in the direction you want to go. From there, it becomes more about how can we do this in an optimal fashion? How can we do this in a manner that's going to allow us to build or maintain as much muscle mass as possible? And how can we fuel our training as best as we possibly can? And obviously keep our insides healthy as well. So for most of my clients, typically what I'll do is send them their nutrition recommendations, which will obviously include their macronutrient targets. I tend to get them to try and stick to certain nutritional guidelines as well, typically aiming for sort of 8 to 12 grams of fiber per 1,000 calories to help with digestion and to help with, I guess, steady bowel movements to keep things regular. As well as looking at sort of anywhere from 2 to 4 servings of fruits and vegetables per day, A, to help with that fiber target, and B, just to make sure that we are getting enough healthy, nutrient-dense stuff into our day. And essentially, as long as they're getting through those guidelines and abiding by those, I don't mind what else they eat throughout the day. Anything that you eat that is considered to be, I guess, not nutritious isn't going to take away from anything that is nutritious that you are eating. So eating a couple of 100 grams of broccoli is not going to be affected by a couple of Pop-Tarts that you might follow that up with. So as long as you're still hitting those nutritional guidelines, I have no issues with my clients want to enjoy their diets as much as possible, provided they're still hitting those and taking care of their nutritional guidelines and eating with their health in mind.
Yeah, exactly right. And that would lead me into my next question of, what was talking about with the intro, eating pizza and stuff like that. People try and, they beat themselves. I feel like being in the industry for 10 years, a lot of my ex-clients when I was personal training, they would eat a pizza and then they would smash themselves in the gym for like 4 hours the next day. Like, what do you say to people like that? Like, how can we improve that and see a next evolution to our food and not becoming obsessed? Do you have any advice there?
Yeah, man. So I used to be one of those people. I have that cheat meal, which would more often than not turn into a cheat 3 hour window, which could even turn into a cheat weekend. And before long, the wheels had completely fallen off entirely. And I think, the important thing is that we put things into perspective, and ultimately, the more that we can understand about nutrition, which what I think tracking macros and actually looking at hitting target macros does very well, is educate you on what's in the foods that you're actually eating. You see, at the end of the day, a pizza is simply a different combination of protein, carbs, and fats, which could ultimately be fairly similar, obviously depending on what's on the pizza, to maybe small chicken breast, a whole heap of brown rice with some cheese, or a whole lot of avocado, and broccoli through the meal. Ultimately, you could get two meals that is a pizza, and one is as bro or as clean as you like, that have the same macronutrient split. Now, ultimately, the chicken and brown rice is probably going to be a lot more food in terms of volume, and it's probably going to satisfy hunger a lot better. But at the end of the day, some days you're going to be like, you know what? I want to eat a pizza today, and I'm okay with the fact that it's not going to fill me up quite so much in comparison to the brown rice and the chicken breast. The best thing about tracking macros is it does give you that education on what is in the foods you're eating. So if you ever are in the situation where you feel like maybe straying from your diet or eating something a little bit different, you can still do that without falling off the wagon, provided you're still working within your target macronutrient parameters.
Yeah, exactly right.
I used to do exactly the same thing, and pizza was always my go-to cheat meal. I'd eat a pizza, and it would just send me overboard, and more often than not, as I said, would lead to 6, 7, 8 more meals or bowls of ice cream or whatever it may be. When at the end of the day, if I just recalculated the rest of my day, restructured the rest of my day, and maybe halve the serving of oats that I had first thing in the morning, and save some carbs from lunch, and maybe missed out the peanut butter on my oats in the morning too, all of a sudden I've got more carbs and fats to play with at the end of the day, which might mean that I can fit in maybe a homemade pizza or something like that. But ultimately, the more educated you can be, and the more understanding you can have regarding what's in the foods you're eating, and the more power you have in terms of flexibility with your food choice.
Mate, that's unbelievable. It's really, really simplistic way to look at it. And what I like about it is people start to take ownership, and then they become aware. So if they've eaten something like you mentioned before, they, you know what, I'm going to eat this, and I'm just going to reduce other things later on in the day, or the next day or something like that. Awesome approach, man. I love that. And
that's it.
Sorry,
man. Just to follow up on that, I've had several clients, and even myself included, that when you first start tracking, you might go to eat something that you would normally eat, and you go to log it, and you see that it's a mountain of calories, and particularly with foods that you might not think contain all that many calories. Like nuts are a great one, for instance. A lot of people think, I can snack on nuts; they're super healthy. They might be full of good fats, but at the end of the day, fats are still fats, and fats contain a lot of calories. So snacking on a handful of nuts might be a tasty thing to do from time to time. But chances are, if you aren't tracking that properly, there's a very good opportunity you'll be overeating. And at the end of the day, you might deem it not quite worthy. You might be more willing to spend those calories on something else, which might actually fill you up more. I know for myself, there are a few foods when I first started tracking that I just think moving forward, it's like, you know what? Under very few circumstances is that food ever going to be worth it, simply because it's so calorie dense and would take out such a big chunk of your daily macros if you are actually going to eat it, that there's going to be very few times you actually want to eat it. So, as I said, mate, the more knowledge and understanding you have about what's in the foods you're eating, the easier this game becomes.
Yeah. And that's what I like about it. It becomes more of a game, and games there's certain rules, and games are meant to be fun as well. So just figuring out a new way to play it.
For sure, man. It's like a mathematical equation.
Yeah, exactly right. And so we're still on the subject of food with our health. And so what do you think of supplements? This is a massive craze at the moment. Like a lot of my friends ask me to ask you as well, like, what do you think of like protein powders, creatine, BCAAs, like all these different forms of supplements. Do you have anything that you could tell these people to stay away from them or to continue on with them? It depends on the person. What do you think?
Look, mate, for me personally, I tend to stick with 3 supplements year round, and then I may dabble with others from time to time.
Mm.
Basically, I think supplements are great when they are used as suggested to supplement an already well-balanced approach to nutrition. I think what most people fail to understand is that protein powder is simply a convenience food. If you can't eat protein from whole food sources, then a protein shake is a fantastic supplement to get into your diet to make sure that you're still hitting your macronutrient targets by the end of the day. Do you need protein powder to build or retain muscle mass? Absolutely not. Does it make your life easier from time to time? Absolutely. I mean, for me personally, typically I'll train clients from maybe sort of 5 p.m. till 8 p.m. at night. And if I train at sort of 3 o'clock till 5 o'clock or between that window, and I don't have a lot of time between when I finish training and actually start to train clients, I will 9 times out of 10 have a protein shake then, because I don't have much time to eat. And a protein shake is just super convenient to get some calories in, to get that protein in after I train, to make sure that I'm still on my way to hitting my daily targets in terms of protein, carbs, and fats.
Yeah.
I mentioned that I take 3 supplements year round. Creatine is the other one that has some seriously good science behind it. If you want to get big and strong, or if you want to retain muscle mass, whether you are a female or a male, you would be crazy not to consider taking creatine. There's a lot of obviously nervous energy out there regarding the whole water retention issue, but there's no need to load it as science would suggest now. So if you can look at taking that consistently, chances are chances are you're going to see some seriously good increases in strength, which is obviously going to relate, in turn, help with increases in muscle size as well. And the other one that I take typically is BCAAs between meals, just to help with the muscle building process. As food breaks down and helping with muscle protein synthesis. So I take those between protein-based meals, roughly 2 hours after that. And then at times I'll also take pre-workout on days that I'm feeling particularly flat, or if I have a particularly challenging lift ahead of me. Outside of that, I tend to argue that everything else is personal preference. Even pre-workout to a certain extent is personal preference.
Yeah.
Some tend to work for some people, others not at all. Again, if you want to give something a whirl, then absolutely go for it. But I think thinking that a supplement is going to get you to where you want to be if you haven't even had a look at your nutrition is a poor way of approaching things. Supplements are fantastic to supplement an already balanced approach to nutrition. But if you haven't first looked at your diet, you are wasting your time and your money.
Yeah, well put, man. Well put. Let's talk about workouts. Yeah. What's the first thing? I know this is a bit of a fun question, but at the same time, there's probably a lot of value in it. What's the first thing you would do to someone's workouts if they want to look like Nick Cheadle?
Okay, so what I like to do with both my training and nutrition coaching is make things as efficient and as optimal as possible. Okay, so let's say, I think I'll answer this question with the intention of either building or retaining as much muscle mass as possible type thing, right?
Yeah.
The best way that we can look at doing that, particularly from a natural perspective, is looking at getting frequent training sessions in throughout the week. Now, if we can train muscle groups more than once a week, that is absolutely the way to go. So whenever I start working with a client, whether they are training their muscles or their main lifts once or twice a week, I will always make sure that they're hitting everything at least twice a week. Science shows us these days that regularly breaking down muscle fibers, even if volume is equated over time in comparison to hitting a muscle or a main lift a single time throughout the week, even if volume is equated, hitting things more frequently is far more optimal in terms of muscle growth and muscle retention. So the first thing I would absolutely do is make sure that people are training things twice or even 3 times a week if possible. Huge fan of I'm not sure if you guys, how closely you guys might follow me, but DUP style training where we're looking at sort of 3, even 4 times per week in terms of how frequently you're hitting muscle groups, simply because research suggests that 36 to 48 hours after you train, muscle protein synthesis, which is elevated after resistance training, is actually down at baseline again. So by elevating that as frequently as possible and essentially spiking that muscle building process more frequently throughout the week, we're leaving ourselves open to essentially making more gains.
Yeah.
Obviously, you need to look at managing your volume throughout the week accordingly. You can't just go balls to the wall, lifting as heavy as you can each day, but with a properly structured program and plenty of frequency, strength and size gains, provided your nutrition game is on point, will go through the roof. The first port of call is definitely to increase frequency. From there, if you can look at varying, if you can look at varying intensities and incorporating some strength work whilst including plenty of compound lifts, I think you're on a one-way ticket to Gainesville. It's going to be hard to go wrong.
Yeah, mate, I agree with that because I have a strong rugby league background. I was a conditioner at the Rabbitohs 20s, and I played a bit of under 20s Roosters myself. So, mate, that was quite similar to the level of exercise we would do. We would hit, we'd do compound movements 4 times a week. So and they're very functional guys. Some people have that misconception of, they're just big guys and they're just meatheads, but actually it's very similar to how you approach your fitness. So just shows that the people in the high athletic world are on a similar page in different sports, which is good to see. Mate, a lot of my friends. What's that? Sorry.
I was going to say that's another thing with compound lifts. Obviously, you're hitting a lot of muscle groups in performing those. So obviously, the more regularly you can do them, the more essentially bang for buck movements you've got in your training, the better returns you're going to get. You could spend 3 hours a week training your triceps, but chances are if you spend 3 hours a week hitting squats, you're going to train a lot more muscles and end up building and retaining a lot more muscle mass as a consequence. So I think if you can focus first and foremost on those big movements and then add in sort of anything to tweak and that you might want to help with improving weaknesses and maintaining strengths, then I would definitely do that.
Mate, great advice. And so I think we're touching on the element of, if we're hitting these targets or hitting these compound movements a few times a week, like I think a lot of my mates would benefit from this because they do go down the road of just hitting triceps because that's what they want to work on, or just hitting shoulders, and they're getting a lot more injuries. So do you think that it's from their fitness program that they're doing that, and do you think that they need to maybe time to go down the Nick Cheadle way of compound lifting? And what do you think on that part of it?
It really depends, mate. I think you can sustain an injury from all manner of things, whether it be technique related or frequency based training. I mean, there's nothing that's sort of going to guarantee that you won't get injured. Ultimately, if you are overloading to an extent that you simply cannot recover and you're giving yourself a good chance of running yourself into the ground and you're seeing a steady decline in strength, then chances are you might be overdoing things. Obviously, if you can look at getting a structured routine in place so that you are having enough time to recover between each session and making sure that obviously you are lifting with good form in that, then you're probably going to set yourself up best to make sure that you can continue progressing. I think another mistake a lot of people tend to make too is that they get into their minds that weightlifting is all about trying to lift as much weight as possible every time or trying to get through as much volume and get the biggest pump possible in a single session. Now, no doubt getting a huge chest pump and an arm pump on a Friday night before you head out for a few drinks is probably a great thing to do. But at the end of the day, if you want to do this for a long period of time, rather than thinking about how much volume you can get through in one session, you'd be far better off thinking about what can I do to get through as much volume as possible in a week, in a month, in a year, in 10 years, to make sure that you can actually consistently progress without putting yourself into a position where you might be feeling like, might get injured tonight.
Yeah. Mate, and you mentioned recovery then. So is there certain things that you do for recovery? Like going back to my footy world, after training we'll do weights and then we'll do fitness and then we'll jump in the ice bath, for example. And then, yeah, so it was quite painful after doing all that exercise to jump in the ice bath, but it was actually quite reinvigorating. And that would be allowing us. There was a lot of benefits from our side of it. The boys still do it in the first grade and in all teams. Is there any little simple tips that you could add for your recovery? Like you mentioned that, like, is it food? Is it, do you do anything in particular that's different or?
Look, I'll be honest. I'm probably the first person to put their hand up as far as I should definitely be doing more mobility and recovery work. I
Yeah,
do tend to neglect it, as most people do, but ultimately, the more stretching you can do post workout as well as between your sessions,
yeah,
the more flexible and more mobile you're going to be, as well as chances are you're probably going to recover a lot better as well, simply by increasing blood flow and helping with anything that might be feeling a little bit sore or tender.
yeah,
When you lift weights, your muscles contract and shorten, so lengthening them back out is actually going to help with not only improving flexibility in both the short and long term, but also with building and repairing muscle mass. So definitely try and stretch, particularly after you train, to sort of limit the damage you've just done in the session. If you do want to look at improving your flexibility and mobility, make sure you're getting extra sessions in throughout the week, simply so you can look at making progress between sessions.
yeah.
Can't say I've done many hot cold baths or anything like that, mate, but obviously there's some good science behind it if you get the
Yeah.
opportunity to. Plenty of foam rolling if possible, and I won't turn down a massage every week or two if I can get one into my schedule. So
Yeah.
I think monitoring volume is obviously key as well, to make sure that you aren't overdoing it and placing your central nervous system and your body under constant pressure and tension to continue performing, and make sure you're obviously listening to your body if you ever do sort of feel any niggles or anything like that.
Yeah. Awesome, man, mate. You're a wealth of knowledge. It's been an absolute privilege to spend this time with you, buddy. Yeah, please let everyone know how we can find you more, because I know there'll be definitely a lot of people that be benefiting through your style of fitness, and it quite shows through the way you look and the way you approach things as well. So, how do we find you,
Thanks.
mate?
I appreciate that, mate. I've done my best to keep it as simple as possible. It's Nick Cheadle Fitness on pretty much every portal you can imagine:
Yeah,
Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.
yeah.
My website is nickcheadlefitness.com, with the only exception being Twitter and Snapchat, which is Nick Cheadle Fit, because I don't have enough characters to get my full name in, so had to shorten it a little bit. But mate, that's where you can get me. You can obviously sign up for my free newsletter as well via my website, which is again nickcheadlefitness.com.
Mate, well, I'll be jumping on there for sure. I'll be signing up for that newsletter. So thanks for your time, mate. I really appreciate it. You're an absolute legend and keep doing great things in the fitness world, mate.
Thank you very much, mate. Appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you.